The text message arrived with a sharp vibration just as we were still sitting at the table. The smell of roasted chicken with lemon hung in the air, and silver forks clinked against the plates now and then. I looked down at the screen, and felt something dry up in my chest. Get up and go. Don't say anything to your son. The message came from the number saved in my phone as my daughter-in-law's. And it was written cleanly in English, without any emotional frills. I raised my eyes, pretended everything was fine, and cut off a piece of meat. My son, Joshua, sat across from me. He chewed slowly, staring down at the table as if listening to an inner voice. His wife wasn't in the room. She had said she was tired and went to lie down. Why did I keep silent? Give me a minute, I'll explain. I always believed in one simple thing: you don't break trust until you understand where the wind is coming from. But that line in the message looked far too pointed. Don't say anything to your son, as if she knew we were sitting together. I raised the phone under the edge of the tablecloth, read it again. No typos, no softening emoji. Just a command. Dad, Joshua suddenly said, setting his wineglass aside, you'll stay with us a few more days, right? He looked at me so calmly that I almost doubted my own eyes. We'll see, son, I answered. Work's waiting a bit, but maybe I'll stay. I hadn't lied. I just didn't tell the whole truth. That evening, when he went upstairs to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The wind carried the smell of wet asphalt after rain. In my pocket, the phone pulsed. I typed back to my daughter-in-law, I got your message. What does it mean? And didn't press send. I deleted it. My fingers were shaking. I realized who I had underestimated, but I still kept quiet. The next morning, I woke earlier than everyone else. The coffee smelled strong, bitter, like it always did in this kitchen. On the table sat the same napkin holder it had for 10 years, the same little salt shaker with a crack. Everything seemed unchanged, except for the words in the phone that cut the air like an invisible knife. I carefully checked my messages. Nothing new. My daughter-in-law acted as if nothing had happened, came down to the kitchen in her robe, greeted me, put on the kettle. Joshua kissed her on the cheek, and she responded flatly, without warmth. That's when I made the mistake that cannot be forgiven. I asked. Catherine, you didn't send me anything last night, did you? She raised her brows, slowly, with surprise. No, why? Oh, I just thought a strange message came through, I muttered. She didn't even blink. She smiled politely, but her eyes stayed empty. And right then I saw something wary in my son's look. As if he had caught the moment and tucked it into his pocket to use later. And then came the phrase after which there was no going back. Maybe, Dad, you're just tired of the phone. Joshua said with forced humor. You should take a break sometimes. He smiled, but his voice had a metallic note. Not a son's, not a family one. Cold. A few hours later, I was in the city. I stepped into the library, grabbed a newspaper, though I didn't plan to read it. I just needed to think without prying eyes. I spread out the pages to look busy and let myself recall every detail of the past few weeks. Catherine had been staying home with her phone more often. Joshua watched her with suspicion but kept quiet. They whispered, stopped talking when I entered. And now, this message. So who was it really meant for? Me, to disappear and not witness something? Or him, my son, to leave his wife? I had one day to turn everything upside down. I decided, no sudden moves yet. I'd stay in the house a few more days. And see who made the first wrong step. That evening, when we sat down to dinner again, I deliberately joked, told work stories, laughed louder than I wanted. Catherine barely touched her food, twirled her fork. Joshua once again stared off to the side, but this time I caught him sneaking looks at the mother of my grandchild. And when Catherine stepped out to the kitchen for a moment, he leaned toward me and said quietly, so she wouldn't hear. Dad, she's planning something. I see it. But for now, keep quiet. His voice was tense, but cold. And suddenly I remembered the words from the message, "Don't say anything to your son." At that moment I knew I stood between two fires. And I still didn't know who was lying. I made a decision that would split our month in half. The third morning began with silence. No clatter of plates, no hum of the kettle. I walked into the kitchen, and Catherine was already there, sitting with her phone in hand. She tapped the screen quickly, then locked it the moment she saw me. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air, sharp, bitter. Joshua came in a minute later. He gave her a brief glance, then busied himself with pouring cereal. They didn't speak to each other, and the quiet was louder than any argument. I had to know what they were hiding. But I rushed things, too soon, too openly. That was my first mistake. "Catherine," I said lightly, "funny how texts sometimes arrive late. Last night, I thought I got something meant for you too." She froze for half a second, then forced a laugh. "Oh. What kind of message?" "Just a line." "Nothing clear," I answered. "Could have been spam." Joshua turned sharply toward me. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment I felt like he was checking if I was on his side or hers. He broke the tension himself. "Dad, you don't need to worry about things like that. We've got it handled." Handled? That word clanged in my head like a warning bell. I realized I had given myself away. They both knew now that I was watching. I heard a phrase that locked me into the game. "If something strange shows up again," Joshua added, calm but firm, "tell me first." Not her. That evening, Catherine disappeared for 2 hours. Said she was visiting her sister. Joshua pretended to believe her, but the way his jaw tightened told me otherwise. I made another mistake, I followed her. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of cut grass. I stayed 2 cars back, headlights off. Catherine drove to the other side of town, parked outside a small cafe. I expected another man. Instead, she met a woman, someone I didn't recognize. Dark coat, hair tied back. They leaned close, whispering over coffee. Papers slid across the table. Not love notes. Documents. When Catherine returned home, I was already there, sitting with the newspaper open. She didn't notice the trace of grass on my shoes. But Joshua noticed something else. "You went out tonight too, Dad?" he asked casually, while Catherine carried her purse upstairs. I nodded. "Just needed air. Couldn't sleep." He didn't press. Not then. But suspicion had shifted toward me. I realized too late, I had stepped into the middle of their plan, whatever it was, and both of them were watching me now. On the 4th day, the house felt colder. Catherine moved quietly, like she was waiting for the right moment. Joshua shadowed her every step, yet said nothing. That afternoon, when he and I sat outside on the porch, he finally spoke. "Dad, tell me honestly. Do you trust her?" The question came slow, heavy. He didn't look at me, he looked at the street, at the kids riding bikes. "She's your wife, Joshua," I answered. "My trust doesn't matter." "It does," he said. "Because you see things I don't. And I know you won't lie to me." He believed I was on his side. And yet, the doubt in his tone cut through me. I knew one thing for sure, whatever Catherine was planning, Joshua wanted it to end in divorce. But the documents I'd seen hinted at something bigger, something beyond marriage. That was the second mistake, I thought I had more time. On the 5th day, the tension snapped in a small way. Catherine confronted Joshua in the kitchen, and I heard it from the hallway. "You went through my bag. And you hide things from me," he shot back. "Because you wouldn't understand." Her voice cracked just a little, and that was new. Joshua didn't answer right away. Then he said coldly. "One day soon, everyone will understand." That was when I realized, I wasn't just a bystander. They had both written me into this play. And now, the only question left was, what role had they given me? The next morning, I would find out. By the start of the second week, the house no longer felt like a home. The walls themselves seemed to listen. Every creak of the stairs, every door closing too softly, every whisper, it all carried meaning. I spent more time outside, walking the neighborhood, sitting on the park bench under the oak tree. From there, I thought more clearly. And I kept circling back to the same question, was Catherine trying to escape, or was Joshua trying to frame her? I promised myself I wouldn't sit idle. If someone wanted me out of the way, then I would stay right in the middle. That was my decision. One evening, Catherine set her purse on the counter and went upstairs. Joshua was in the garage. I knew I shouldn't, but I opened the bag. Inside, among receipts and lip balm, was a folded envelope. It wasn't addressed, but inside were photocopies of property deeds. Not their house, but something else. Land across the county, signed under Joshua's name, dated years back. Why would she carry those papers now? I put everything back carefully, but guilt burned through my hands. That was when I realized, I wasn't just watching anymore. I was interfering. And that raised the dilemma, was I protecting my son, or betraying him by doubting? The following night, Joshua cornered me on the porch. The air was heavy with the smell of rain on dry wood. He spoke low, like confessing something he had rehearsed. "Dad, she's hiding money. She wants out, but she'll take everything with her if I don't stop her." I didn't answer right away. He leaned closer. "That message you got, it was meant for you. She wanted you gone. She doesn't want a witness." There it was. His version. Simple. Convincing on the surface. But I had seen the deeds. And they bore his signature. I heard myself ask. "And if you're wrong, Joshua?" He froze, then shook his head. "I'm not." His voice cracked on the last word. For the first time, I wasn't sure if it was anger or fear. 2 days later, Catherine tried a different approach. She sat with me in the living room while Joshua was out. No phone in her hand, no guarded eyes. Just tiredness. "You think I don't know what he tells you?" she said quietly. I stayed still. "He wants me out. He wants you to take his side. But if you dig, you'll see who's really lying." She leaned forward, her perfume faint and sharp, mixed with the smell of dust from the old sofa. "He forged my signature on those deeds. He wants to shift everything under his name. He needs you to believe I'm unstable. That's the plan." Her words landed hard. I wanted to believe her, but I knew the danger. Whoever I chose to believe, I would betray the other. I kept my voice steady. "Why send me that message?" Her eyes flickered, the first slip. "Because, you'd warn him otherwise." That was enough for me to know, both of them were playing me. That night I lay awake, listening to their muffled voices upstairs. A fight, then silence. And in the silence, I began to form my own plan. If they wanted me as a pawn, I'd become the board itself. I would dig into those deeds, I would track where the money moved, and I would set a trap. But to do that, I needed to decide whose betrayal cut deeper, hers or his. And here came the moral dilemma: was it my duty to protect my son, even if he was the liar? Or to expose him, even if it shattered what was left of our family? I didn't yet have the answer. But I knew one thing: by the end of the month, one of them would face the truth. I had already chosen the first step, and it would take me out of their house the next morning. The morning I left their house, the sun was pale and weak. I told Joshua I needed to take care of something in town. He didn't ask what. Catherine barely looked up from her coffee. Both of them seemed relieved to see me go, and that told me enough. I drove straight to the county records office. The place smelled of paper dust and ink, like a library that had forgotten time. I requested the property deeds I had glimpsed in Catherine's purse. After half an hour of waiting, a clerk slid a folder toward me. There it was in black and white. Joshua's signature, but with dates that didn't line up. One document carried a notary's seal from a day when Joshua had been overseas. The handwriting, close, but not exact. I knew then, Catherine was telling the truth about at least one thing. He had forged her name, and maybe more. I understood why she wanted me gone. She feared that, out of blind loyalty, I would shield him. But the question burned in me, how far had my son gone already? That evening, I returned to the house. Joshua greeted me on the porch with a look that was too calm. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked, hands in his pockets. I didn't answer. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that says he already knows. Later, Catherine pulled me aside in the hallway. Her voice was sharp, almost desperate. "You see it now, don't you? He'll ruin me. He'll use you to do it." Her hand touched my sleeve, trembling, cold. I pulled away. "If you want my help, Catherine, you tell me everything. No half-truths. No games." Her face hardened. She wasn't ready. And that was when I realized the trap. Both of them thought they were pulling me to their side, but neither understood I was building something separate. I had the documents. I had time. What I needed now was proof of motive. The turning point came 2 days later. Joshua invited me for a drive. Said he wanted to clear the air. We headed out past the town limits, where the road narrowed between fields. The car smelled faintly of gasoline and leather, windows down to let in the wind. He didn't speak at first. Then, "Dad, you should know, if she tries anything, I'll come out on top. I've made sure of it." I didn't flinch. "What did you do, Joshua?" He gripped the wheel tighter. "Let's just say the papers are already in motion. And when she walks with nothing." There it was. The confession without saying it directly. He had set her up. And yet, even as I listened, something inside me cracked. My son wasn't just trying to save himself. He was hunting his own wife like prey. I thought I had one more week to figure it out. But the truth had arrived earlier than I expected. That night, I pulled the deeds from my jacket and spread them on the table in my room. Forged signatures. False seals. My son's scheme laid bare. I couldn't deny it anymore. I also couldn't ignore the risk. If Catherine discovered I held the papers, she might use me as her weapon. If Joshua discovered it, he might cut me out of his life entirely, or worse. I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door handle turned, then stopped. Whoever it was walked away. That was when I knew, the house was no longer safe for me either. The secret was out. Now it was only a matter of who would act on it first. In 3 days' time, everything would explode. And I would have to decide whether justice meant saving my son from himself, or delivering him to the consequences he had earned. This was when I allowed myself to believe I was the one steering the wheel. I decided to start playing by their rules, but on my own terms. If Joshua had already stolen truth from her with papers, then I would borrow truth where paper had weight, bank statements, archive copies, phone logs. My task was simple, make his plan collapse from within. But simple doesn't mean easy. That evening I stayed in the house alone, under the pretense of working on old documents. Catherine went to meet the same woman from the cafe. Joshua said he had a night shift in the workshop. I prepared, scanned old checks, notebooks, photographs. I carefully set traps, not criminal ones, but paper traps, copies that would raise questions about him without directly pointing at me. I wanted him to be caught by his own words. I blindly believed I could sidestep mistakes of the past. I thought as the lamp above my desk flickered. The first step was primitive and almost childish. I slipped into his work bag. Yes, I did it, a notebook with statements I had recreated from the archive. I didn't sign anything in my own name, I simply planted evidence that only he could explain. If he signed off on it, the truth was mine. If he tried to deny it, I would let the right people know. But here were two problems I hadn't foreseen. First, I underestimated how carefully he checked his things. Second, I forgot that he, too, could plant evidence. I smelled gasoline and heard the key turning in the lock before Joshua entered the room. His look was calm, almost sleepy. He didn't see the notebook. I kept myself still. "Dad," he said, "were you in the garage?" I looked up as if absent-mindedly. "Stopped by. Checked the old tools." He nodded, walked past me, and his hand brushed the bag lightly. My heart raced, but I didn't move. The next morning, the first unexpected blow landed. After a short walk through town, I returned home to find Joshua on the phone, tense, his voice thin but firm. His eyes burned with the same coldness I'd seen before, but now there was fear too. "Did you see my notebook?" He threw at me without looking away from the call. "No one's supposed to see it." I felt the weight of a lie pressing against me. "I saw it," I wanted to say. But just then, another call came in, and he lifted the phone to his ear. I caught only a fragment. "She knows, Dad, he's planting something," and in that fragment I understood that my trap was no longer just for him, someone else was playing too. I looked again at my copies and noticed one small mistake. I had forgotten to erase the archive's processing date stamped at the bottom. When I slipped that document into his bag, someone had already noticed the discrepancy and started building counterdates. That meant someone was watching us, or Joshua had an ally I didn't know about. Microhook, I had made a mistake that cannot be forgiven. The following days became a series of one step forward and two back. I laid out my copies, tried to add electronic trails, but was met with a counterstrike, an anonymous email in Catherine's inbox, "Warning, stay out of it." I didn't know who it was meant for. The unknown began to suffocate, and every gesture of mine became cautious. One evening, when I thought the plan was working, Joshua appeared in the doorway holding two papers from the police, an official warning from a lawyer about defamation. Though I had signed nothing, the table before me held clear evidence that someone had already twisted the facts. He looked at me as if I had betrayed him. It turned out he had prepared his own counterattack, forged emails, links to fake bank transactions, all designed to prove Catherine was unstable and that my interference was further evidence of her instability. I realized the war had moved to a new phase. It was no longer just a family quarrel. This was now a public game, using legal weapons. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I wanted to expose my son, but every step put both him and me in danger. And then came the blow I feared most, one I had not predicted. One night, men showed up at the door, faces I had never seen before. They weren't police, but they carried badges and papers that looked official. They asked for documents, photographs, access to accounts. A chill ran down my spine. One of them greeted me by name, as if we had known each other for years. They spoke of a fraud investigation and looked at me like a key witness. I asked them straight, "Who sent you?" And got nothing but a vague smile. That was when I realized my last mistake. By stepping in deep, I had attracted the attention of people who wouldn't play nice if things went wrong. I was no longer just the grandfather in a family album. I had become the source of instability. And when those men left, leaving behind the faint smell of cologne and an unspoken warning, I knew the next move would not be mine alone. Someone else had already placed their piece on the board, and it would move soon. In the morning I woke with one thought: I had started this, but I had no idea how it would end. End of Act 5. I had made a decision that would split our month in half. In the morning, someone would knock at the door, and it wouldn't be the ones we expected. The knock came at dawn. 3 sharp raps on the wooden door, loud enough to wake the whole house. I was already sitting at the kitchen table, coffee cooling in my cup, waiting for it. Joshua came down first, barefoot, hair messy, eyes narrowed. Catherine followed, clutching her robe tighter. The air was heavy, like before a storm. I opened the door. 2 men in plain suits stood there. Not the same ones from before, different faces, but the same air of authority. One of them spoke with a calm voice that carried a threat beneath it. "We'd like to ask a few questions. About documents in your possession." Joshua's eyes darted to me instantly. Catherine's face went pale. That was when I knew, both of them had thrown me under the bus. They'd pointed to me as the keeper of the evidence. I had prepared for this moment. Without a word, I walked to the living room and brought out a single folder. Inside were copies, not originals, not everything, but enough. I placed it on the table in front of them. "These are what I have. Nothing more." Joshua clenched his fists. Catherine looked like she might faint. The men glanced at the papers, exchanged a look, then closed the folder. "Thank you, sir. We'll be in touch." And just like that, they left. The silence afterward was worse than their presence. Joshua turned on me first. "Why would you keep those? You were supposed to back me." His voice cracked, full of betrayal. Catherine cut in before I could speak. "He backed the truth. Something you've never done." The two of them glared at each other, and for the first time, I saw how deep the hatred had grown. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about marriage. It was about control. And me, I was just the lever they both tried to pull. That evening, I packed my bag. Neither of them stopped me. Joshua sulked in the garage, pretending to work. Catherine locked herself in the bedroom. As I stepped onto the porch, the air smelled of pine and distant smoke from someone's chimney. A neighbor waved, I didn't wave back. I looked at the house one last time. I knew the fight inside would go on long after I was gone. The papers I'd handed over would ignite something bigger, an investigation, lawsuits, maybe worse. And I couldn't save them from it. But I had done what I could, I had made sure neither of them could claim innocence. Here's the truth I learned that month: family can wound you deeper than any stranger, because they know exactly where to strike. And justice doesn't ask if you're ready. It just arrives, with or without your blessing. Now I'll leave you with a question that's been sitting heavy in me ever since: was I right to hand over those papers, or should I have burned them and walked away in silence? If you want more truths without polish, stay with me. I've got stories this family never put in any album.